guys! So today's video is going to be a kind of sketchbook experiment video. I recently bought a new sketchbook. I have it right here. And as you can see, it's really nice. It has this embossed cover, and I'll show it a little bit later in the video. But I'm very unfamiliar with the paper in this sketchbook. I haven't really ever felt anything quite like it. And so I need to do a little bit of experimentation and just swatches and sketches, and I just want to get a general feel for this very pretty, very nice new sketchbook I have. So that's about the extent of my plan for this video, and let's just jump into the experimentation. So here's the sketchbook. As I mentioned in the intro, it's really pretty. It has this kind of engraved cover. I'm assuming it's not real leather and it's faux leather because it was only $10, but it's really pretty regardless. And the paper, I'm gonna open it and see if I can get some of the texture to show up. Oh, it might. But essentially, it has a texture like watercolor paper does, but it's very flexible and it almost has a fabric-like feel to it. And I've definitely heard of cotton watercolor paper before, and I'm not sure if that's what this is. There wasn't a lot of information about it. It was in a little gift shop, so the actual details of the sketchbook itself were pretty scarce. But not only did I like the cover, but I kind of felt like the paper would be an interesting challenge because I've never used anything quite like it before. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one directly on the surface, and I'm actually going to gesso this page so that I have a primed surface to work on. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that really quick. Okay, so first impressions. Gesso seemed to lay down really well. I've definitely used sketchbooks and papers that do not like to have gesso on them. For example, this is an art journal I made out of paper bags that have kind of a plasticky film type covering on them. And this was gesso, and you can see how rough it applied. That was because of the glossy coating, and it really did not like that. However, this paper seemed to take it really easily. I will say the binding is not great. It isn't very flat. Maybe once you get to the middle of the sketchbook, it'll be better, but if you look, the binding, it's pretty deep in there, and I think it's because the signatures are so large. But, you know, it's a small complaint, and for the challenge of a new type of sketchbook, I think it'll be fine. So now that I have that done, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start going through some of my regular art supplies to see how they apply. I did a similar video to this, and I called it a sketchbook review over on my other channel. Here we go. This is a Derwent Precision Mechanical Pencil. I think it's out of lead. Cool. Hold on. Instead, Ticonderoga Black. Now, gessoed paper should work very well with pencil. But what does it look like? That's what I was wondering. Okay, so pencil, it's not necessarily bad. I just can't make it as dark. And that, I'm assuming, is because of the fabric-y nature of this paper. Of course, if you gesso, it works and it picks up on all that nice texture. Alright, so that's a start. Let's just try a micron. This is a really thin micron. I'm going to go directly onto the paper here. It doesn't seem to be bothered at all. This is a fairly thin, and by fairly thin, I mean it's the thinnest micron there is. So let's try a thicker one and see what that does. Here's a 0.3. Can't find one of my 0.8s. That also seems to work fine. Doesn't seem to bleed through or anything, which is good. I'm actually not going to try my microns on the gessoed paper, mainly because it's a very good way to wear down the nibs on your pens because it has a rough surface. Let's try a ballpoint pen on this surface. It works. I will try a ballpoint pen on this one. Alright, it doesn't seem that different. Maybe it's just this ballpoint pen. It's a brown one. So I can use my inks on this paper, which is good. And it also seems like you can get some variation, which is nice. On the gessoed paper as well. So if I was going to gesso a page, I think I would probably use a ballpoint pen or perhaps a brush pen. Let's try that. If I didn't want to ruin my microns. I bet that could be cool, actually. Hold on. Yeah. So if you go a little faster, you can get some really cool texture, which would make cool hair or clothes. Okay. So you can go slow if you want more smooth, defined lines. And of course, it's picking up on all the texture that's already in the paper. It's something to keep in mind. Some cool effects we could get. Let's try something with water in it. Let's try this Derwent sketching pencil that is water soluble. Now I wonder if it will do anything on this paper. Okay, so it does move. It just can't get as dark. What if I dipped it directly in the water? That's something else you can do with water-soluble mediums, is you can dip them directly into your water and get really dark, solid lines. So let's try it on this head. Okay, so it does work. All right. That's another way you could do lines on this type of paper. And those are lines that I can't get with this pencil without it being wet. This is falling apart. That's because it needs sharpened, but okay. So it is almost, I almost wonder if it is like a watercolor paper. Nothing has bled through yet, which is good. I'm very curious about this. This paper is very interesting. I've never used anything quite like it before. Let's try a Crayola marker. Sometimes I like to use these. Yeah, it works. I wonder if I can move it. Sometimes with watercolor paper, you can move water-based markers. You can, 100%. Interesting. Okay, so it is reacting like a watercolor paper for the most part. So let's pull out the watercolors. Let's see what just flat out watercolors do. This is the Mungyo palette. Let's try to blend into this. Let's use some green gray. So you can blend it pretty well. Let's do a shape. Let's do a face real quick. I'm getting distracted and not using the gessoed surface. So it does blend like watercolor paper, and it's picking up that nice texture, which is cool. I'm very curious about this because I didn't expect it to react so much like watercolor paper because of the texture of it. I've never quite felt a paper that feels like fabric before. But it's reacting very similarly to watercolor. Let's come in here and put some of this greenish blue in here. Extra weird shadows. Let's start by trying to work out this Crayola marker. Interesting, so it almost doesn't do the same thing on the gessoed surface. Maybe it was just wet? No, it seems like on the non-gessoed surface, it blends better. So it is reacting like a watercolor paper. It definitely doesn't like it when you're very aggressive on it. It's starting to pill, as you can see. But I mean, it's not bad. Interesting. I keep saying interesting, but I'm very intrigued by this. Okay, so watercolor works. So definitely if I want to do something in pencil, exclusively pencil, gesso is definitely going to be the way to go. But it almost seems like the watercolor works a lot better on this paper. So let's see what ink looks like. Alright, so that was very cool. My ink wash in a water brush worked very well. It seems to layer a bit, so if you want to add more of the same color over top, it does get darker. But I will say, I think my water brush did not want to accept this as a paper, so it didn't seem to come out of the brush very easily. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my Uniball Signo gel pen and add in the whites of the eyes, or see if it will let me. Yeah, it totally lets you. Maybe I'll try my other white gel pen just to be fair. That was wanting to carve. Hold on. This might just be my pen. Does not like that one bit. So the Uniball Signo works. The Jelly Roll does not seem to work. Let's try this again. Yeah. Let's do an acrylic paint. I want to give her blue hair. She looks like she should have blue hair. I don't know what brush to use. I'm going to go with this one. No, I'm not. Let's do a couple of different round brushes. I'll start with the smaller one. Now, of course, this should work perfectly fine on the gesso because literally the point of gesso is to make it easier for paint to go onto it. It almost feels better without the gesso. It's a very interesting paper. I don't really know how to explain it. Let's try this ink pen on this gesso real quick. It works. Gesso is not really made for water-based mediums, so it works, but it's going to naturally be better in something that will kind of absorb its color. I almost don't want to touch this. Let's go in with ink. Actually, I'm gonna try a highlighter on here real quick. Works fine. I'm so confused about this paper. I really genuinely am. I've said this a lot, but I've never used anything quite like it, and it's really confusing me. So I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna give her a hair tie. And I'm gonna give her a choker as well. And now, as just one little detail on her, I'm gonna come in here with this Bic marking pen and just add some little rivets to this and see if it works on the paper. It actually doesn't like that very much. I took it, but it does not like it. It wants to pull up the paper. That really threw me for a loop, the fact that water takes to it so well. If I were to give a review of this sketchbook, I would say it's weird, and that's about the extent of it. I don't have anything better to say other than it's very strange, and I've never used anything quite like it. However, even though I thought that gesso was going to be better for this paper, I guess I kind of underestimated what it was capable of, and this is exactly why I like to do these types of experiments before I really start a sketchbook, because I don't really know what the paper does yet. This was a little more obvious because it was so strange even just to touch. It felt different. But anytime you start a new sketchbook, you don't know how that paper is going to respond until you've used it. If any of you know what this might be, this paper, if it is that cotton watercolor paper, or if there's something else that you think it might be, I'd be very curious to hear from you. Thank you all so much for watching as I stared in awe at this paper and tried to figure out what the heck was happening with it. I hope I was at least mildly entertaining. You can subscribe if you want to see more videos like this or completely different from this in the future. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.